Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country, powered by Backcourt Marketing. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and once again, there are no football and basketball games to talk. Wait a second. There actually is a football game to talk about this week, Shane. Not really the real thing as we experience come the fall, but at least it was some live football being played in April, right?
Football-ish, yeah. No, I wasn't able to get down there for the game. I know you weren't either. We were both there last year when it was, there was less hope for the team, and you had the COVID restrictions, but wasn't able to do it this year. But obviously kept an eye on it, and some of the guys who we thought were going to stand out did, and we're going to talk to our guest about that. You're going to introduce here shortly, I'm sure. But can you glean much from this game? No, but it's fun, and they had the splash zone and all that. So I think that Jedd Fisch and his staff do as much to bring this excitement to what has been a bad program as possible. Last year having Gronk and Teddy Bruschi be the coaches, this year Teddy Bruschi and Lance Briggs, and then having bringing on Adia Barnes in the system, all the fun stuff. But no, it was nice to have some football to watch. And not all the guys who were going to play in the fall were even on campus yet, so you have to keep that in mind as well. But football is football, and we'll take what we can get.
We will be joined by our friend, the professor, Matt Moreno from GoAZCats.com in the second segment. But first, it is time for our weekly tradition, Buy or Sell. And if you're watching the podcast, you can see this wonderful ice shaker, which is our sponsor for Buy or Sell. Check out iceshaker.com and use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, for $5 off to get one of these things with our logo on them. They're actually really cool, and they work very well. And Shane and I got another one. It's kind of like a water bottle type. I took it on the golf course this weekend, and he is showing it. If you're watching the video, you can see this thing. It's awesome. Took it on the golf course, and it kept my water nice and cold despite it being somewhat hot outside. So you'll want that for over the summer. But okay, it is time, Shane. Buy or sell. We're going to do 4 football, 1 baseball, and then you'll see what's in my bonus question. Okay, number 1, buy or sell. Arizona's starting quarterback for San Diego State on September 3rd should still be considered a question mark after the spring game. Buy or sell?
You've been the guy, Eric, who's been trying to convince me that Jayden de Laura is obviously going to be the starter going into the season. I still think he will be. I'm not basing too much that happened in the spring game on what's going to happen going forward. Certainly Noah Fifita stood out, and Matt Moreno is going to talk about that, I'm sure. He tweeted out how he expects Fifita to get on the field in some capacity in the fall, which is interesting. And Matt Moreno is not a provocative guy like some folks we know, and wouldn't put that stuff out there unless he believed it. So, the results of a scrimmage mean as much as what happens in the fourth quarter of an NFL preseason game, probably less. If you thought de Laura was going to be the QB1, before the spring game, in my opinion, it's silly to think he won't be after a single scrimmage. But I think he'll probably be the guy. But I think that, to me, the more interesting question is who's going to be the QB2, and could it be Fifita, and could Jordan McLeod, who I was impressed with at least in the UCLA game as much as we saw him last year, and thought he had the potential to be a bona fide Power 5 starting quarterback. Could he be the QB3 going into the fall with Noah Fifita emerging as he has? So that's an interesting question, but I think it's funny because you finally convinced me that de Laura is going to be the guy, and now you're like, well, it's up in the air, and I think you're just trying to make something out of nothing.
I am. Yeah, I'm selling this one, Shane. Jayden de Laura is the starting quarterback. He's not transferring. The Pac-12 Freshman of the Year is not coming to Arizona to sit on the bench. The team that went 1-11 last year, let's be honest. And that's nothing against Noah Fifita, who, as you said, from the highlights that I saw, looked really good in the spring game. He's not ready. He would be best served from sitting for a year or two and then taking over the reins of this program from there. I think Jordan McLeod will probably be the backup on day one if he stays. But Jayden de Laura is the starting quarterback at the University of Arizona, barring injury, on September 3rd. There is no doubt about that in my mind. We could just move on from that one. I just threw that in there. Just want to get your opinion on it.
That's fine.
Open and shut, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Number 2, buy or sell. On paper, Arizona has the best skill position roster. That's quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends in 2022 since at least the Mike Stoops days. So 2011 and before that, buy or sell.
Now, does that include Sam Thomas at wide receiver or no?
It does not include Sam Thomas, but that was a cool moment. That was nice.
No, okay. Actually, let me give you a buy or sell within a buy or sell. Buy or sell, Sam Thomas being the most beloved U of A student athlete since TJ McConnell, because everyone loves her.
I think that's a really good one, actually.
We can say that for another time, but think about it. Because
that's a slight buy. I got to think about that. But
isn't that interesting?
That's a really good question. Okay.
All right. Well, your question's good too, so I'll answer it now. I'm not stalling, I promise. If you factor in tight end, I might buy it. Yeah, I think it could be. I think, back to the beginning of the Rich Rodriguez era, you had Matt Scott at quarterback, Kadeem Carey tailback, Trey Griffey, Austin Hill, Dan Buckner at wide receiver. And then the following season, with Anu Solomon and Nick Wilson in the backfield, they didn't miss a beat. So certainly one of those teams I think could contend for that role. Even with Khalil Tate in limited action, you throw in JJ Taylor and some of the wideouts he had then. But Keon Burnett could be the difference maker there. We talked when we had him on our podcast. The highest rated tight end recruit Arizona's had since a guy named Rob Gronkowski, the brother of the inventor of the ice shaker, which you should go to iceshaker.com and buy. You like that? You like that extra plug?
You
love it.
Yep.
But yeah, Keon Burnett could be the difference. And he looked the part in the spring game again. Take that spring game for what it's worth, which is not much, but it's an interesting question. And it's crazy to think that I could buy it because of how bad this program has been the last several years. I will buy that they certainly could. We'll see, but it's close. But Arizona hasn't had an elite tight end for a while. If you're just doing quarterback, running back, wide receiver, maybe not. But you throw in tight end and maybe.
All right. So here's why I'm going to buy this, Shane, because of the depth that we see, at least in terms of the skill talent that we've seen in the past. And of course, highlights from these young guys, like the wide receiver room is stacked. We'll talk about that with Matt Moreno, with T-Mac and Jamari Joyner, Majon Wright, Kevin Green, Dorian Singer. And I'm probably missing some guys just offhand. That is a talented wide receiver room. You look at the running back room, there's 5 or 6 deep of guys that could start, and you could make an argument for it. Quarterbacks, you got probably 3 guys that we just talked about, Delora, McLeod, and Fafita, who could probably start. And then obviously Keon Burnett, who is the best tight end probably to come to Arizona since Rob Gronkowski. Depth-wise, this is probably the best Arizona roster offensively at the skill positions in a long time. Those other teams back, even the Stoops teams, they had standouts. You look at like Kadeem Carey was great, and Rob Gronkowski was great, and Jerron Kreiner was great. Austin Hill was very good. But when you combine this group of talent and what I expect from them, this might be the best Arizona skill position roster in even longer than that.
I'd like to revisit a question you asked me a few weeks ago, which was really interesting. It was that buy or sell Arizona being in the top half of the Pac-12 in total offense. And if you buy that this is the deepest team that Arizona's had in over a decade at the skill positions, you'd have to buy that question as well, wouldn't you? So I'm going to, because I didn't dodge the question. I just wasn't sure last time. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and buy that one as well from way back when. I'm going to throw that in as another bonus buy or sell for this one. Did you mention my guy, Majon Wright, by the way?
I did mention Majon Wright.
Okay, good.
I did, yes.
Did you know that I like him a lot? I think he's
and he also, by the way, is a sponsor of Ice Shaker. If you want
Ice Shaker, get his Ice Shaker as well.
And your Wildcat Country one. Okay.
Yep.
Number 3 in buy or sell, defensively, Arizona should expect to take a step back without Don Brown, who is now the head coach at UMass.
I'll buy it, at least early in the season. I don't think depth is quite as much of a concern on the defensive side as well as offense. In fact, I think, especially in the secondary, I think Arizona could be better than they were last season, and that really wasn't a weakness for Arizona last year. Overall, the defense wasn't bad for this team last year. But the fact that Johnny Nansen has never been a DC at the college level, you have plenty of guys from last season who got used to playing Don Brown's style of football. So, I think they'll take a step back early in the year before everyone gets on the same page. Nansen's the wild card. We know he can recruit. Can he be the head guy on defense? He's never been that guy, at least at the college level. He hasn't been in high school a long time ago. So Until everyone gets on the same page, especially with some of the freshmen who aren't even on campus yet, it's going to be a little tough, I think. But I think long term, by the end of the season, the second half of the season, I think the defense is going to be much better than the first half.
I will buy it, but I agree with what you said right there in that last line. I think the second half of the season, you'll see improvement. That's all you can ask for. I mean, this team is probably not going to a bowl game, and I'm sure we'll ask that question buy or sell over and over and over between now and November. But you just want to see continued improvement throughout the year and then set it up. I really think the big year for Arizona, and we'll cover this sometime. The year you want to circle on your calendar is 2024. I mean, if you're going to make a shot, you're going to take a shot and expect this team to make a Rose Bowl run in the South. The schedule sets up well in 2024 with guys, with a roster of T-Mac, Noah Fafita, Speedy Luke, Jonah Coleman, all being juniors or redshirt sophomores. Then just put that one on your calendar. I know it's a ways away, but this team will have growing pains over the next 2 years. 2024, assuming everybody stays together, that should be the year Arizona flourishes. Okay, number 4, the lack of fan attendance at the spring game, which looked kind of pathetic, honestly, should be a huge concern to the athletic department. Buy or sell?
No, I'll sell that. I don't think it came as a big surprise to anyone. Arizona, look, they're a bad football program, and it was 95 degrees on Saturday. Okay. The only thing that's going to get fans in the seats is the same thing that's always gotten them in the seats, which is winning football games. Now, I know the spring game is a little different, but still, the excitement of the spring game goes with how much success you had the previous season. And then, that goes into the excitement the following season. This is a program that's lost. Seriously, I've lost counts. 23 of its last 24 games, something like that.
I have to do the math, but it's
a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's in the 20s.
Yeah.
Arizona's not the type of school that's going to win fans over by strong recruiting classes and water gun fights. That's all fun. I enjoyed watching it, but even when they start winning again, the fans will show up like they always have. And Arizona won't have the opportunity to do that, for a chance for more victories until September. And that's just the way it is.
So I think Arizona makes a mistake, Shane. And no, I don't think the athletic department should be concerned about the lack of attendance, but why is this game not at night? ASU does theirs at night. Why couldn't Arizona's be at night? I'm not sure that would have made a huge difference, but it might have. You're not playing during 95 degrees. If you sell free food or something, you get more people out there. I'm just saying. I think during the day last year when you and I went, it was super hot.
Yeah. Everyone looked for the shady spots in the stadium.
You and I sat in the last row of the stadium last year for part of it because we just wanted to get. We didn't want to climb all those stairs, but the fact is we want to get shade. Yeah. So I think doing it during the day in April, not a great idea. Just my opinion. Okay, let's do a non-football one here. Number 5, buy or sell. We should be very concerned about Arizona baseball after losing the weekend series to a bad Washington State team.
Eric, all of your buy or sell questions have been good up until this one. It was a series. And it's one they could have easily won. They probably should have won the second game and won the series. But I mean, were we that concerned after the men's basketball team had a blip on the radar at Colorado?
Yes. We freak out over everything, Shane.
Well, I guess I shouldn't say we. I wasn't, and they came back and they were fine. They blew out USC. We all felt better. Arizona should have won the series. Washington State's not good. They blew a late lead on Saturday, the second game of the series, but it happens. They're still 22-10 overall. They're tied with Oregon State for first place in the Pac-12. Their RPI did drop considerably from 10 to 33. That's a big drop.
Whoa.
But yeah, it is. But they come back and they win 3 out of 4 against New Mexico State, who that game might be over by the time you're listening. And they beat, they have Utah for a 3-game series. So they win 3 out of 4. They'll start moving back up. They'll be fine. They have plenty more opportunities against good Pac-12 teams to move back up. So, their offense is still humming along pretty well. Our guy, Daniel Susak, who we had on last week, hit a home run in Sunday's game. Pitchers struggled, especially their bullpen at times, but it was one series. And in baseball, anything can happen in one game. It's a little different than basketball, where, if you get blown out by a bad team, it's a big cause for concern. In baseball, 1 or 2 games, I'm not concerned. No,
I am a little concerned, Shane. The RPI drop. I'm not going to use the word very, but I'm going to somewhat buy this. No, you shouldn't lose to ASU, and you shouldn't lose 10-6 to ASU, whatever that result was. I think it was last week. And then to Washington State 2 out of 3. You got to win series. And I'm mildly concerned.
I think they'll be fine, Eric. And okay. I understand the concern, but I think there'll be a lot of season left. The reason that they dropped so much in the RPI is because there's still a lot more games to go, and there's not that big a sample size yet. They start winning, they beat some good teams, and they'll climb right back up.
Okay, bonus question, Shane. Ben Mathurin tweeted something or posted a picture on Instagram, one of the two, that was somewhat promising for Arizona fans about his participation with a team and whatnot. Now, we're recording this on Monday night, and also there was a group of Wildcats that went to the rec center, including Ben Mathurin, Christian Coloco, and Dalen Terry. Azuolas Tubelis, Pelle Larson was in that mix as well. They went there just to play ball. Did these signs kind of give you a hint that maybe Ben Mathurin is seriously thinking about coming back? So the buy or sell question is this. Buy or sell, there's a 25% chance or more that Ben Mathurin comes back next year to Arizona. Buy or sell?
Sell, because I think it's maybe 0.1%. And I would honestly, I'd be the first guy to kick him out the door. Go be a lottery pick and go make a lot of money. I think he's just kind of having fun on social media. I think he knows how much Wildcat fans want him back, and he's sort of messing with us, which it's fine. I can't imagine he comes back.
Me neither. No,
I don't see it. The 25% I think is still high. I know that maybe seems like a number where like the over under there, but in this day and age, I don't see it. I think the bigger question is whether Coloco and or Terry will return.
So if you're Ben Mathurin, like, what do you need to be guaranteed to go to leave Arizona? Like, is it in the top 10? Is it in the lottery? Is it in the top 20? In your opinion, what is that number for Ben Mathurin?
There's no guarantees, but I think every mock draft that I've seen has him as a lottery pick. And I haven't looked in a couple of weeks, to be honest. So maybe that's changed, but I can't imagine that it has too much. So it's hard for me to say because I'm not in that position, Eric, but I feel like if you're like 99% sure you're going to be a first round pick, period, go and make your money and do it before you suffer an injury and you can't do it anymore. That's the way I look at it. I would, again, as a fan, I would love to see him come back. It ain't happening. And you feel free to play this soundbite if it does happen and, share it with old takes exposed and everything. I've been on there twice, by the way.
Have you really?
I have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Big badge of honor for me.
Yeah.
But no, less than 25%. I'm going to sell that.
NBAdraft.net, a website that I always like to go to check out where they have players going, has Mathurin going number 7.
Yeah.
And they have Christian Coloco going with the second pick in the second round in 2023. Also, Azuolas Tubelis going number 38 in 2023, and Dalen Terry going number 52 in 2023. So
interesting.
I think that all three, well, Tubelis maybe second round. I think Terry and Coloco are first round picks if they stay another year. Let us talk to Matt Moreno about that coming up in the next segment.
Yeah, and real quick, Eric. I think the wrinkle thrown into this whole thing is the whole NIL. You never know if these guys can get some guaranteed money, not necessarily NBA money, but some guaranteed money to stick around. I mean, and it's weird to talk about that. It's weird just to say that after from a few years ago, Book Richardson got thrown in jail for this stuff, but this is our way of life now in college sports, and if they know they can make some money sticking around college for another year, maybe that would encourage them to stay as opposed to taking the leap.
Hypothetically, Mathurin, Coloco, and Terry stay. Is Arizona the number one team in the country going into next season?
No doubt about it. Especially because they're going to add at least, well, depending on how many spots they have, they'll probably add at least one awesome transfer in the portal. So, yeah.
Probably not going to happen, but worth thinking about as well. Matt Moreno, the professor, as I like to call him, going to join us. We'll ask him about the football spring game, and we'll talk to him about basketball here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Krakowski here. Bear down. Let's go. I wanted to introduce you to the newest sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. That's the Ice Shaker. So check this out. Keep your drinks hot. Keep your drinks cold. We got you covered. Snag one today. Use coupon code Wildcat Country at iceshaker.com.
Shane, once again, we have our most popular guest, I guess, well, in terms of appearances, let's say. Matt Moreno, who has been the senior editor of GoAZCats.com, is joining us. But, Matt, before we get going, you're not just the senior editor of GoAZCats.com anymore. You have additional responsibilities, so congratulations. But what are your new roles now with Rivals?
A little bit of everything. I'm just covering a little bit more Pac-12 schools, a few more Pac-12 schools, expanding our reach with, more Pac-12 recruiting. Really lets me dive into what I like to do, as you guys know, which is recruiting, and just get to do more of it now. So, it's allowing me to get to know some more prospects. It's been really interesting and really fun to get to cover some other schools. And, Rivals want to continue to bolster its West Coast representation. And so, I was the one that they picked to do that. And so it's been really fun to continue to expand on what I've done for, a long time at Go AZ Cats, and, cover some other schools and get to know a lot more recruits. And it's allowing me to attend a lot more events. And so it's been really good to kind of get some insight into someone like Justin Johnson, who just committed to Arizona. I was able to see him in person already. And so it's really helped me kind of get to know the Arizona guys a little bit more, and obviously know a lot more of the West Coast recruits that are out there.
Well, as I always say, and Shane does as well, when you're on the show, we always feel like we went to class when you teach us things. So I'm glad that other schools will now get to realize your expertise on the West Coast, just like we do often. My first question to you is actually not about the spring game. It's about recruiting. Do you look at Jedd Fisch's success this year as a flash in the pan, considering what's coming down the road in the Pac-12 with USC's reemergence under Lincoln Riley? Or is this the start of a trend, you think, that as long as Jedd Fisch is at Arizona, we should expect recruiting to be pretty decent?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, head and shoulders above kind of what it has been for pretty much my entire time covering the team, maybe outside of 1 or 2 years where they really, had a lot of success. But for the most part, it's been pretty subpar, which is unfortunate because, I enjoy covering high level recruits, and it would be nice to, cover top 20 classes every year at Arizona, but just hasn't been in the cards for whatever reason. But it's definitely going in the right direction. I think the conversation about Arizona, that's one of the things. I've been to a lot of camps, been to 7-on-7s, spent some time on some high school campuses. I think the one thing that at least I've noticed about Arizona is they're coming up a lot more in the conversation, and they're coming up in the conversation with a lot of schools that around a lot of schools that they wouldn't normally be associated with. They're kind of in that talk now of like, oh, they can be competitive with a USC and an Oregon if they want. And, even, maybe drop it down a step to some other schools. They're still in the conversation with a lot of, top programs. I mean, you look at Justin Johnson, who I just mentioned, Michigan State, they beat out Michigan State, which is a program that a lot of people really like and have done really well, and have honestly done really well recruiting Arizona. So, I think it's a step up for Arizona. I think it does have some staying power. It will be more difficult. That will be the challenge. And I think everyone's still trying to work through this NIL phase of what's going on. It's impacted so much. And I think everybody's still trying to figure out what their plan is going to be with all these schools. And, I think for Arizona, I think we've seen the benefit of that. I think it's hard to ignore the class they put together and say, well, it kind of coincided with the NIL stuff kind of going on. You have Noah Fafita and T-Mac starting a podcast. You have a lot of different things going on that involve NIL. And so I think it's benefited Arizona, but I think a lot of programs, even the top ones, are figuring out, okay, what are we going to do? Because the SEC schools they're not messing around, and they have a lot of backing when it comes to NIL. And so I think the Pac-12 schools are trying to figure out, okay, how much do we put into this, and how much emphasis do we need to put on this? And so it's still kind of an interesting phase, but I think once everything settles and once everybody kind of finds a nice level where they want to stick, I do think Arizona has staying power because of, everything else outside of that. I think this doesn't come together just because of NIL. I think a lot of it has to do with, the coaching staff. Most of it has to do with the coaching staff and, the people on campus and their pitch and what they're selling. But I think they have a chance to put a really strong class together again. We've already kind of seen that getting going. Braden Dorman, obviously a 4-star quarterback, one of the top prospects, in the class, says, I want to go to Arizona. I want to play for Jedd Fisch because I want to get to the NFL. And so as long as there's that NFL connection, which that's not going away anytime soon, you can't take that away. That's not, you can't take away the experience that all these coaches have had, in the NFL. And so I think as long as that remains, I think they're going to have a good shot to continue to build this momentum. And I think it's going to continue for Arizona. Maybe not at the top tier level like they had. I mean, it probably will be a little while before they get another 5-star recruit. It had to be kind of the perfect scenario with T-Mac. But I think what I've been saying is I think this next class is going to look a lot more balanced. It's not going to be so top heavy because they have such a really strong top of this class in 2022. The bottom half is a little bit shaky. I think you're going to see a lot more higher rated 3-star guys that make up kind of the bulk of the class. And I think it's going to be a lot more balanced when you go, if there's not very much separating, the top guy in the class from the bottom guy in the class, which is ultimately what you want. You'd rather have, yes, it's nice to have a class that you get a bunch of top end guys, but if the bottom of your class isn't very great, you're still trying to make up some room where if you can have a strong class from top to bottom, that's what you want. I think that's kind of where Arizona's headed in this next class.
NFL and NIL, the two big acronyms for Arizona football going forward. Let me dive into the spring game, Matt. I feel like the spring game is really the kind of the college equivalent of like the fourth quarter of an NFL preseason game. You can't really, it doesn't really matter that much, but in as much as it does, what you saw on the field, give us a couple of guys who you were especially impressed with, maybe beyond the obvious names.
It's difficult to go beyond the obvious names, but I think overall, I thought that the freshmen, I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, that the freshmen did so well. And again, as we said, we take it for what it's worth. It's a spring game. Yep. Usually doesn't look very much like the other 14 practices over the course of spring. Usually doesn't look like what happens once they get on the field for, against another team. So take it for what it's worth. But I thought the freshmen overall really looked the part. And I think one thing you can take from that is there's a different kind of shift in terms of talent that's coming to Tucson. I think that's where you start to get at least a little bit of a glimpse of it, where you go, oh, these freshmen all kind of perform well. It was kind of a mixed up group, but they're going against some starters. Some of them might be starters themselves, but I think the talent, there wasn't a big talent disparity. And I thought the new guys standing out kind of tells you a little bit about kind of the overall makeup of the roster. There's been a lot of transfers, a lot of guys that have left. There needed to be a talent improvement. I think you're starting to see that now with this class that they brought in. This true freshman that just got here not that long ago. They started to shine a little bit in that spring game. We'll see if that continues, but I thought Noah Fafita, I think it's hard to look beyond Noah Fafita. And I think we talked about it a while back, when he was going through the recruiting process and even going through his senior season at Servite. I still feel, and I tweeted this, I still feel like he has a chance to make some noise. And I think everybody saw why, in the spring game. It's more sharp than you would expect a freshman to be. The ball comes out quickly. He has some good accuracy. And again, as I said before, the only knock on him, and he knows it, is the height. If he's 6'3" and doing what he did in the spring game, I don't know that we're talking about him at Arizona, because he would have had his pick of schools, I think. And so I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how he continues to go and build from this. But overall, I thought it was really impressive. It was kind of everything we've seen. But I think for the fans who maybe didn't get a chance to go out to spring ball or just haven't really paid attention to him, I thought it kind of showed them exactly what he's about. And I think the one thing that we know is he's always going to play with a chip on his shoulder. He's always going to understand that people are doubting him because of his height. And I think that helps him. And then another guy on offense, another freshman, unfortunately, but Kevin Green Jr. He did some strong things towards the end of spring, but in the spring game, I thought he showed what he's capable of doing. I think he's an overlooked guy in this class. People forget that he was committed to USC at one point. He's a talented player, and maybe it'll be sooner than later. I was kind of saying, well, maybe he's going to, he'll do some things, get enough to kind of get in the mix maybe a little bit, but now it looks like he's going to end up being potentially a key player for this team in a very, very deep wide receiver room that has a lot of talent. And maybe that's one of the overarching things too, is when you just look across the board. I didn't mention T-Mac, but there's just so many weapons offensively. And I think that was one of the things too that stood out, was just overall the skill positions offensively. You can go to Jonah Coleman, Kean Burnett, Jalen John. Even, guys that were around. There's just so much talent at the skill positions offensively that I think Jedd Fisch is going to have a lot of fun. Defensively, I think one of the newcomers that really stood out was Hunter Echols. Kind of has been quiet at USC, hasn't had the greatest career, kind of had 1 year where he was, playing pretty well, was with Johnny Nansen. And so maybe that's kind of been the key to helping him unlock things and just having more opportunities at Arizona. But I thought Hunter Echols did some nice things, and there's a nice buzz about him over the course of spring that I think with more of an opportunity that he'll get at Arizona, I think he has a chance to do some really good things and kind of help, Jalen Harris on that other side kind of balance things out and maybe give them both a chance to be more productive than they've been.
Yeah, let me circle back to what you said about Noah Fafita, Matt, because I was going to mention your tweet about you think he's going to find a way to get on the field, and you're not a guy who just flippantly says stuff like that. There's a reason behind it. Do you think that he could challenge for the starting quarterback job as soon as this season? Or do you think maybe he comes in for a series every so often, just as a change of pace guy? How do you see that playing out?
It's a difficult situation because I think if it was completely wide open, if Jayden de Laura is not involved here, I think Noah Fifita has maybe the inside track to getting this job. Obviously, you have Jordan McLeod, who looked pretty good on Saturday at the spring game and has the experience on his sides, and usually coaches, as much as they say it's an open competition and we love to have the best man on the field, they tend to lean toward the veterans and the guys who have experience. They just feel more comfortable that way. But I think he'll push Jayden de Laura, and maybe that'll be really positive for Jayden de Laura in that, he at least knows, hey, I can't slack off because I have somebody who they're ready to give the keys to if they need to. So I think that's going to be important for the entire kind of health of the quarterback room. But I think he's going to get on the field probably in a series or two. I think obviously he has 4 games that he can play and still keep that red shirt. I don't know. To me, knowing how he is and kind of how he thinks of himself and his game, and I think he's probably going into this going, I'm not redshirting. I'm going to play as much as I can. So I do think, again, I just think he's just too good at this point, and he does things too well to kind of, keep him on the sidelines. So I do think he'll come in. Also, we've seen how this thing plays out with quarterbacks. We saw last year how many guys they had to rotate through. There's so many different things that you just don't know about right now that could happen, that you go, hey, Noah Fifita is now your starter for the last 6 games of the season because he's the healthy one. I mean, there's just so many different things that could happen. But I just think based on his play, I just think that it's going to be difficult to keep him on the sidelines for the whole season, whether that's a series or, playing a quarter or doing some things here or there. I just think that eventually, I just have the feeling that he's going to get on the field in some capacity and do some things and showcase his abilities.
Matt, you talk about the dearth of weapons that, just that Arizona has. I mean, it's really impressive. Wide receiver, you can roll out 3 or 4 guys at one time. Running back, not so much. There's only one guy realistically that can be on the field at once, maybe 2, but only one guy that can really get the ball. Arizona seems to have a lot of running backs: Rocker, John, Wiley, Speedy Luke. How do you see that situation? Jonah Coleman. How do you see that situation playing out come the fall?
There's a lot of guys back there, and they all can play. So it's very much similar to the wide receiver room in that there's not really a hole on that in that running back room. I mean, there's all those guys can play, all those guys can do different things. It's going to be a challenge, I think, to get everybody on the field, but also very similar to the quarterback position. We saw this spring, not everybody was healthy for the entire spring. And I that's one of those spots where, guys are going to get banged up, whether they miss a game or 2, miss a quarter, miss some time, miss half a season. There's going to be some guys that get banged up playing running back. And so I think that's where they're going to be helped out. I don't think, unfortunately for them, I don't think they're ever going to get into a position where everybody's completely healthy. It's just the nature of the position and of playing, running back in college. It's not going to happen. So I think they'll get some leeway in that. And I think that's part of why they prepared and built the roster the way they did, is because they understand that's a position where you're just going to go through those issues where guys can't play. And so I think they'll avoid kind of necessarily the issues of not enough, only one ball and not enough, players to be able to get in the games, or too many players to get in the games. But, it's going to be very interesting to see how it kind of shakes up and who maybe gets the most touches, because again, Jonah Coleman was really impressive. Has the size, had everybody kind of buzzing through the course of spring. But then you have, Drake Anderson, who has the speed, who he was pretty banged up, over the course of the spring, who has the veteran kind of presence on his side. Michael Wiley has, been injured a bit as well, but everyone knows what he can do. Jalen John continues. Jalen John almost feels like the Nathan Tilford in a lot of ways, where it's like every time we see him, it's something positive, but it's just difficult for him to get consistency and get on the field, enough to make an impact. And so it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how it shakes out with him, because I do think he's a very talented player, but I think eventually someone's going to be the odd man out, unfortunately, but it'll be interesting to see kind of who that is and how they kind of determine, what they do. Because again, even if you look at Stevie Rocker, he can play and does some different things that none of the other guys on the roster can do. Speedy Luke, as you mentioned, is not even on campus yet, and potentially could be 1 or 2 best running backs on the team. So it's just, it's a very deep group, and it's going to be, it's one of those good problems I think that coaches like to have, is, we have too much talent. Let's figure out who we're going to use. But it's going to be interesting to just kind of watch how that plays out over training camp.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been able to say that about Arizona. Let's be honest. When it comes to transfers, you talk about all these guys. I mean, there are guys in the running back room. Drake Anderson, I didn't even mention. How many of these guys do you see transferring out before fall camp starts, especially at the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver positions that we pay attention to more so as skill position players?
It's tough. I mean, I'm sure there'll probably be one or two. I think there's going to be a few just because the nature of how it goes. But um, it also feels like there's players that want to be involved in this offense. I think a lot of players have put a lot of work into trying to be successful within this scheme. And I think bailing now would feel like that, would feel like they're bailing on something that, they tried to build and really worked hard at. And so I don't think it's going to be as many as you think. I think a lot of that has already happened. I think what we've seen is this last, the 2021 recruiting class has really taken a big hit with the transfer portal. And you can talk about that and examine that however way you want, but it feels like maybe the talent wasn't necessarily what it should have been. And that's kind of how it shook out. And they see that, those guys in that class see, hey, they're already recruiting kind of ahead of me and they're bringing in more players and those guys are, looking pretty good. And so it'll be kind of interesting to see kind of how it all plays out. But I think a lot of kind of the exits have already kind of happened for the most part. I think there's just a lot of guys that are almost too invested in this process. They had to deal with last season. That's difficult. It's a difficult thing to go through to only win one game. And I think a lot of them, to me, it feels like we kind of feel like they're bailing on something that is starting to build. Because again, if you look out there and you watch, what was on the field Saturday, you saw a lot of positive things, especially offensively, where I think a lot of guys want to be part of that and feel like they can have success and don't want to necessarily get out just to kind of, have their own moment to shine. Because the other thing too is I'm sure they've looked at a lot of their teammates. A lot of the players that have entered the portal the last couple of years have not ended up at better schools. That's just kind of the reality of how this process has gone. A lot of them are still in the portal. There's a couple guys that, entered the portal last year that never found a home that are maybe starting to get a little bit of traction now, but they're not playing at USC or LSU or Notre Dame or Michigan like maybe they thought they were going to, or some SEC school. They had to drop down a level, and that's where they found their home. And so I think, if they really truly evaluate kind of what it's looked like and what's happened with the other Arizona players that have transferred, it's not necessarily a greater position that you're in. And a lot of guys that have left and entered the portal that don't have a home could have been big parts of the team last year and could have been big parts of the team this year. And just instead they're in the portal kind of just sitting there because Arizona had to move on because these players left and just don't have a home. So it's a difficult situation. And I think there's been a lot of observing done by a lot of the players. And so I think kind of much of what's happened already is kind of what it's going to be. I think it's inevitable you add a few more guys to the portal, but I think it'll stay pretty intact at a lot of those key offensive positions.
The first time and several times we've had you on, Matt, we can actually talk some basketball recruiting. There's actually some news. And Tommy Lloyd, since the last time we talked, he added a pair of commits for 2023, KJ Lewis and Kylan Boswell, the latter of whom is one of the highest rated point guards in the country. Just give us a synopsis on both of those guys for those who aren't too familiar with them.
Yeah, it's funny. There's still people who are going like, well, why is, obviously Arizona lost out on Tyrese Proctor to Duke, and people were like, well, why can't Tommy recruit? What's he doing? I've heard some of those comments on our message boards, and I'm going, are you paying attention to what's going on at all? I mean, they have 2 top 25 recruits for the 2023 class, which is the true kind of first class under Tommy Lloyd, because last year was so difficult. He came in April. By that time, most recruiting is done, even though, those players are going into their senior year. They're still technically juniors at that time. Most of the recruiting is done at that point. It's very difficult to pick up and start to recruit players who have been, talking to coaches for a few years. So that was difficult. The other thing that was a challenge for Arizona, under that for that first recruiting cycle under Tommy Lloyd was he just didn't have anything to show. Players didn't know, recruits didn't know what the offense was going to look like. Yes, he can tell them, hey, I helped, build Gonzaga, and you can watch them play, and we're going to play a similar style. But until they see it out on the floor, they're not going to really know what it's going to look like. And so I think there was some definite hesitation with a lot of players that Arizona was recruiting. Arizona was definitely in the conversation with a lot of top end guys in this last year in the 2022 recruiting class, but weren't able to kind of push it over the top. And I think that had a lot to do with it, is that there just wasn't that full trust and what is it really going to look like? And so I think that hurt Arizona a little bit. But so now this 2023 class, was the first one that got to see how things played out, and guys are really excited. Kylan Boswell had pretty much every offer you could want. KJ Lewis is right on the cusp of 5-star status, really had every offer you could want. But they both really were impacted by the style of play, by Tommy Lloyd as a person. I think they really found somebody they really liked and felt comfortable with Tommy Lloyd, and obviously the other coaches on staff as well. But I think for them, it was a lot of it had to do with Tommy Lloyd and just his personality. And KJ Lewis is a off the ball guard. He can play, he can handle the ball a little bit. I think of him more as a little bit of a shorter Ben Mathurin. I think is kind of, if you want to make a comparison, somebody who can handle the ball, who can shoot it, a slasher, who can get to the basket. But one of the things he talked about, was just his comfort level with Tommy Lloyd and being able to kind of, feel like, he's part of something. And obviously he's someone from Tucson, originally living out in El Paso now, had that connection. It was the program he always grew up rooting for, but, he still needed to see some things and see, what the program had to offer. And so I really like what he brings to the table. I think he has a chance to potentially reach that 5-star status eventually. Like I said, very similar to Ben Mathurin, a little bit shorter, but a very similar game. Whereas Kylan Boswell is going to be Arizona's future point guard. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. More likely than KJ Lewis to reclassify. Both guys have talked about it. KJ Lewis is more kind of just a conversation of, hey, what would happen if? Whereas Kylan Boswell has made some steps towards, hey, this could be something that I do. He's talked about it for much longer. And so, but with his game, to me, he's Arizona's future point guard. I mean, he's a really tough player, someone that kind of fits what they were missing on this last team. When you kind of got down into the NCAA tournament, I think the toughness kind of started to show itself, or lack of toughness started to show itself a little bit more. And Kylan Boswell is not that player. I mean, he's somebody who's going to be tough. He's definitely a guy who, steps up on the defensive end. That's kind of what he's more known for at this point, is kind of just being a lockup defender and someone who's going to guard the other team's best player, lock them up at the point guard position, but also a facilitator. He can score, but he's going to be more of the floor general type and someone who's just going to keep things moving and get the offense moving, lock down on defense, and really be a solid piece for this team. It would be very interesting, just kind of for my own sake, to see what it looked like if he ends up reclassifying and what happens this year with this team, because he probably has the talent, at the point guard position to knock off somebody like Kirk Kriisa and take that job. But do you want to do that? And does Tommy Lloyd want to make that decision? Although it would allow Kirk Kriisa to play his more natural position, which is off the ball and shooting guard, and let him kind of do things that way. But it would be a very interesting scenario if Kylan Boswell decides to reclassify and move up.
Yes, a lot of moving parts, Matt, as far as this recruiting class for next season. You have the one guy locked in, Dylan Anderson. And then I think a lot of uncertainty after that. You mentioned Boswell possibly reclassifying. We don't know how many guys are going to come back, how many scholarships are going to be available. We don't know if the IARP's decision could come down. They could reduce scholarships there. How many more guys do you see Arizona adding? This is my last question for you, by the way. How many more guys do you see Tommy Lloyd adding to this year's class? Or could you even begin to answer that at this point?
There's, like you said, there's so many moving parts, and you hit on all of them. And I think that's not just us. I think that's going on within the basketball offices too, where they're trying to figure out, what's going to happen and who's going to leave, and what is the situation with the IARP. I think the way Tommy Lloyd has recruited over this last year, I think, and he's kind of alluded to it a couple times, but I think his anticipation is that they're going to lose some scholarships. And you also don't want to over recruit and plan on having guys and then get hit with the scholarship reduction, not even thinking about it. And then you have to go, oh no, what do we do now? So I think he's always been a little bit more cautious, and then said, we'll kind of figure it out later when that time comes. And the figure it out later part is the transfer portal, because that is always there. That's never moving. There's always players going into that who can play. I think Arizona is going to be one of those destinations once things really start to ramp up with the transfer portal, because we really haven't seen it, get rolling like it's going to at some point, in the next, few weeks here. And especially once the NBA decisions start to come out and people decide or maybe learn they're not as high of a draft pick as they once thought, or maybe they're going to go undrafted. That's when, things start to really heat up with the transfer portal. And so I think based on the way they play, the success they've had, I think Arizona is going to be one of those destinations that a lot of good players want to at least check out and see and get to know a little bit more once they hit the portal. So I would say, to answer your question, probably two. I think at this point you assume that Ben Mathurin is going to move on and go on to the NBA. And I've always said, even before the end of the season, I think the conversation is obviously Christian Coloco, Dalen Terry. What happens with those two guys? To me, it's always felt like two of the three will be gone. Pick the two outside. I mean, we know Ben's gone pretty much, we assume. probably pick one of the other two, and they're most likely going to be gone. And so I would be pretty surprised if all three end up going, but I guess nothing could be too shocking, in this day and age when everybody feels like, they're an NBA talent, and their window is not very big. But I think they'll probably end up losing a couple guys, and then you kind of figure out, what's next and how to go from there. But I think there's no panic in Tommy Lloyd. He showed no panic last year, and everyone, I think, was kind of shocked at that, at why are they recruiting so few players? Aren't you going to need a lot of players to fill out this roster? And he was kind of like, we'll figure it out. And they figured it out and went on a deep run, and had a pretty good season. Not necessarily the deepest run that fans would have liked, but a good run in the NCAA tournament for what they had. And, I think the picture looks kind of similar to where I think they feel like they're going to be okay, and they'll find some guys in the portal. And I think for that, it's kind of a day-to-day thing, because a guy that they might not be even thinking about right now could enter the portal tomorrow and they go, that's our guy. And, eventually he ends up being a starter for Arizona. So I think there's still a lot of things that need to be looked through and examined, and it changes daily. But I would say they probably add a couple more before the summer's up.
And my last question for you, Matt, and as always, thank you for joining us. Is it unfair to say, considering Arizona will likely lose 2 out of 3, as you predict, that the Wildcats will be a national championship contender again next season? Yes or no?
I think so. I mean, I still think there's a lot of good pieces to this roster. And I think, again, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but I just think, and maybe I could be wrong completely. It's happened before. But I just think that there's going to be a lot of talented players that we're going to see some guys that I think enter the portal. You go, I didn't realize that guy was even going to be available, or, a player that is just a clear talent that is going to want a home that can get him to the next level right away, and wants to, is going to want to go play for a winner. This team was a number 1 seed. I mean, yes, you're going to lose your best piece and potentially a couple of your top pieces, but if you return most of this roster, it's still a very, very good team. And so, you drop in a player who's maybe comparable to someone like Ben Mathurin, who can score like he does, which they're out there. This is very much a national championship caliber team. And I think, at the very least, they're going to, I think, be on the same level or close to the same level they were on this year. You just have to kind of give it time to come together.
Class is dismissed. Matt Moreno, senior editor of GoAZCats.com, and of course, now West Coast recruiting guru for Rivals.com. Thank you for joining Shane and I. As always, we always learn so much from you, and look forward to having you back on again, I'm sure, a few times this summer.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Here with Dale Duncan, a very satisfied customer of Backcourt Marketing. Dale, can you tell us what Backcourt was able to do for your company?
Well, they're taking me to the next level with helping me connect to new people for my business. They're helping me find new customers online. They meet with me monthly. They're listening to what I need, and they're really focused on helping me get there.
Excellent. Well, Dale, we appreciate your time. If you know someone who needs social media help, refer them to Backcourt Marketing and get rewarded. Or if you need social media assistance yourself, make sure to check out backcourtmarketing.com.
Always great to talk to Matt Moreno. And just one thing, Shane, you asked him about this after we were done recording. His pronunciation of Ben's name, he calls him Mathurin.
Mathurin, yeah. I thought maybe we were pronouncing it wrong the whole time. Sometimes we're pronouncing an athlete's name wrong, and then sometimes maybe he'll just randomly say, "Oh, by the way, it's actually this." But Matt said that's just his preference. So I guess there's no right or wrong way to pronounce it. But yeah, I've always said Mathurin, but it could be Mathurin. It could be Mathurin. I like Mathurin.
We'll stick with Ben Mathurin.
Okay.
Remember last year I called him Justin Kier, and we learned he corrected me as Kier.
So yeah.
You never know. Okay. One last topic. Great to talk to Matt as always. Before we get into our last topic, want to give a shout out to our friends at Just Sports. They hooked Shane and I up with some very cool Arizona gear a few weeks ago, and you should check them out. Shopjustsports.com or in store at any Just Sports. You can just there's a discount code online and in store. It is Wildcat Country, or actually it's just online. I'm sorry. Wildcat Country, all one word. You get 10% off site wide.
All caps, Wildcat Country. Yep.
And if you want to go shop in person, you're in Tucson, check out the A City location on Main Gate Square next to Fuku Sushi. So check them out. I always want to thank our friends at Just Sports as well. And Shane, my question here, Let's talk about coaching tenures for the big three in Arizona athletics right now. Jedd Fisch, Tommy Lloyd, and Adia Barnes. And I think the big question is, we see what Jedd Fisch has done. Let's start with him. See what Jedd Fisch has done with this program. And you kind of mentioned when he was first hired that this guy's kind of he's a job hopper, right? Like he goes from job to job. At what point would you be okay with Jedd Fisch leaving this Arizona program? What would you need to see before you'd be like, yep, okay, he's left him in better shape than he found him, and I'm good with him taking a bigger job, a la what Jay Johnson did in baseball?
Well, I never begrudge a guy for taking a better job, but as far as a fan, like when would I be satisfied? At least getting back to a bowl game, I think is the baseline. If you left after this year, I'd be a little ticked off about it. Here's one area where I think maybe we were a little unfair to Jedd Fisch, and definitely he has moved around a lot, but part of that is that's the life of an assistant coach in football. There's so many guys who, like, just about every top assistant coach, like Mike Hankwitz is a great example, who took over for John Makovic after he was fired. You look at all the different places he's been. It's just the way things are, and especially with assistants, when coaches get fired, they bring in their own staff, and you can't stay. You don't have a choice to stay or not. You have to go somewhere else. So. When he was hired, he talked about how he wanted to, plant some roots and have his family and his kids stay in one spot for longer than a year or two at a time. And I take him at his word for that. But again, if I'm of the assumption, Eric, that if and when he does well at Arizona, I think he will do well. Eventually, he'll probably leave. But I don't think that's going to happen for at least 3 years. Number one, because I don't think Arizona is going to be good for at least 3 years. And number two, I really do think he wants to stay a little bit longer than that, unless he gets an astronomical offer he can't refuse.
Now, when you look at Arizona's coaching tree, let's say in sports, when is the last time in men's basketball, in football, and in women's basketball that a coach left voluntarily for another job? Now, in football, I believe it was in the late 80s when Larry Smith went to USC, and then Dick Tomey was hired. Since then, every football coach has been fired. Women's basketball, after Joan Bonvicini left, they had some trouble. I think it was Nia Butts, and that didn't go great. Yeah. She was fired. And then in men's basketball, obviously it was Lute. He left voluntarily, didn't take another job, but for health reasons. And then you had the Russ Pennell, Kevin O'Neill, before Sean Miller, and then he was let go because of obviously concerns around the program. So another Arizona coaches, it's weird that they don't take other jobs. So we don't really talk about this. So that's why the Jay Johnson thing caught us off guard. I mean, same with softball, because Mike Candrea didn't take another job either. Obviously retired. He was there so long and then retired. So we're not used to this. Like what Jay did was like blindsiding a fan base that just hasn't been used to it for the last 35 years, Yeah.
And the only other recent example is Tony Amato with the soccer program. Leaving for Florida. So it doesn't happen.
I mean,
I understand you're talking about, football, men's hoops, women's hoops, softball. Or I would say the big five with baseball and softball. Yeah. So I think that's a fair assessment. I think between Jedd Fisch, Tommy Lloyd, and Adia Barnes, I will predict that the one of the three who leaves the soonest is going to be Adia Barnes.
Whoa!
And I'm not saying she's going to. I'm saying if one of them does, because there's been talk that maybe she would go to the WNBA at some point. I don't necessarily think she would take another college job.
Is that an upgrade though?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
I don't know that it is.
I feel Dave Hickey and Dr. Robbins did a great job to keep her here, but they had to basically tear up 2 contracts in a month or two to make sure she stayed at Arizona after their Final Four and run all the way to the national championship game. So I think she loves Tucson. She loves the university. She's an alum, but I think that maybe she'll look to take on bigger challenges at some point. I think at the college level, I don't know if she would leave, because I think she's proven that she could recruit here. I mean, look what she's already done. And I don't know if she's going to necessarily get a job that's necessarily better in that regard, because she's already proven she can recruit here. But I more of a hunch, I guess. I don't have any inside information. Adia Barnes hasn't hinted that she's going to go anywhere. I think Tommy Lloyd, would be content to coach at Arizona for as long as he can.
It's a destination job.
It is. It absolutely is. Jedd Fisch, I think, will stick around for a while, assuming that he starts winning, and I think eventually he will. Maybe as soon as the season, he'll win a few games, hopefully. But I could see Adia leaving in a few years. Again, it's just a gut feeling.
Yeah, and I would say, there were rumors about her. I think it was Baylor or LSU that they were talking about that job last offseason. So here's the thing that I want to bring up with Adia Barnes. Like, you look at Rich Rodriguez when he was at West Virginia, his alma mater, right? And then he left. He was doing great there, and then he wanted a bigger challenge and went to Michigan, which was a disaster. And then he was out of a job for a year and came to Arizona, which I don't think he ever really embraced being here. And since then, his career has kind of nosedived. I mean, let's be honest, I wish him nothing but the best at Jacksonville State. But this is a guy that if he had stayed at West Virginia is probably still coaching there, and they're putting his name on the stadium,
What's interesting, though, Eric, is like you mentioned, Arizona coaches who left for other jobs. Rich Rodriguez almost did with South Carolina. And then you remember 2 years into Sean Miller's tenure, he flirted with Maryland quite a bit.
Yes, he did.
And he was tempted to go back to the East Coast because he's from that side of the country. So there were a couple of almost. So it's not that it's never come close to happening. It just hasn't. And it doesn't mean that it can't happen again.
Right. I think Jedd Fisch, to me, is the one that would leave soonest. I think if Adia Barnes takes Arizona to another Final Four, she's going to get some activity from other schools. But if you're taking teams to, multiple Final Fours, as long as Arizona can pay her competitively, why would you ever leave? I mean, at some point in life, what I've learned from the Rich Rod saga, let's just say, you just got to get content and be like, you know what? I can win here. I can do a great job here. I don't need other challenges. I don't know. That's just my take on it. I think Rich Rod's story is an interesting career arc that other coaches should pay more attention to and not get as greedy. I think
a lot of us were surprised when Rich Rodriguez was fired when he was, because it looked like the program was, he did pretty well. And it looked like they were, the following season, they're going to be very good with Cool Tate at quarterback, who was a classic Rich Rod kind of guy. And then, of course, we know what happened after that. We have to talk about that. But I think the jury's still out on whether he was a success and whether he would have gotten Arizona back to, a New Year's Six game like they did in 2014 or not. But he didn't leave. He was dismissed. And I think that he was looking forward to building on some of the success he'd had at Arizona, and he didn't get that opportunity.
When you get a job at your alma mater, though, and it's a good place and you can win there, which Adia has proven she can win there, you just, in my opinion, you don't leave. If it's a big school and you've taken a team that about as far as you can go, like Harbaugh took Michigan to the Final Four in football, like the college football playoff, he's not leaving for any other college job. You'd only go to the NFL.
Yeah, well, and we had Chappelle on before the season started. You weren't part of it. He's
not going anywhere, right?
Well, yeah, and when he said, people asked him, where are you going? And he, when are you leaving? He said, what am I sick or something? Said, no, this is my last job. And I actually believe it with him. I do too. I think this is a dream job for him, as long as the salary is competitive. If he gets other offers and Arizona can at least match it or come very close, I don't think he's going anywhere. He loves the University of Arizona. He knows they can win here. They're one of the most successful baseball programs in the country. And it's kind of funny. We don't talk about that more often, but they are. And they won a College World Series when he was here. That they came close to winning another one a few years ago. They won one in 2012. So it can be done. And you combine that with the fact that he loves Tucson, he loves the university. I don't think he's going anywhere. So there are benefits to hiring alums, provided that they're competent at their job. That's the only caveat.
And that is a big caveat. Shane, want to thank our primary sponsor, Backcourt Marketing. As always, they've been a great primary sponsor for us over the last 6+ months, and we always appreciate their contribution to the show. Check them out, backcourtmarketing.com, and on Twitter at backcourtmktg. And if you know a small business that needs some social media help, refer them to Backcourt Marketing, and you can get a reward. So check them out, backcourtmarketing.com. Want to thank Matt Moreno, the professor, as I like to call him, for joining us and imparting plenty of wisdom on the football and basketball team. And Shane, as always, it's a lot of fun getting to talk with you about all of the things that are going on in Arizona athletics. So for Shane Dale, I am Eric Cohen. As always, bear down.